mom, dad, brother, sister, family. To most people, these words mean the world. These are the people they can count on time and time again. Now, how do these feelings change when adoption is thrown into the equation? Or does it change at all? The emotions, reactions, and attitudes associated with adoption can vary as much as people do. For some people, adoption changed their view of family forever, and for others, it's still as simple as family. While the practice of adoption has been around for millennia, the recent history of adoption in the United States can be tracked to only the 1850s, with the passage of the first modern adoption law in Massachusetts that recognized adoption as a social and legal process based on child welfare rather than adult interests. Adoption is a process where a person assumes the parenting responsibilities for another person. Adoptions can occur between related family members or complete strangers. Unrelated adoptions usually occur through international adoption or foster care adoptions. Local college student Autumn VanCore story starts in foster care.
I was adopted when I was a baby. At 13 months, it became official with the court and the law and everything, but I was put in a foster home right after I was born, and I stayed there about a little less than a year, I guess, till I was about 13 months, and then that's when I moved in with the VanCores.
Modern adoption practices usually take the form of what is called an open or closed adoption. The norm for modern times is often a closed adoption. However, some opt for an open adoption, and usually for a specific reason.
Mine was an open adoption. The difference is, an open adoption, you have contact with the biological family for a little bit, and a closed adoption, you don't have any contact with them. Like, you can't contact them on the phone or email or anything, and a lot of times in a closed adoption, they don't even give you the birth mother's name or anything.
A big obstacle after the adoption process is the decision or question of when to tell the child he or she is adopted. If not handled carefully, this can have devastating effects not only on the child but in the family as well. However, this obstacle may not always be an obstacle for some families, as in Autumn's case, where it was never a question if she was adopted or not.
I pretty much have always known my whole life, because growing up, being the only African American in your family with a family of Caucasians, it's pretty obvious. No one sat down to explain it to me or anything. It just kind of was obvious, and everyone knew.
Interracial or transracial adoption is the adoption of a child that is of a different race than the adoptive parents. Beyond foundational issues such as child development and parent-child relationships, adoptive parents of a child of a different race have a whole other set of different circumstances and issues to deal with, including making sure the child feels like a part of the family.
I guess it wasn't any different, or it wasn't hard or anything, because it's just all I knew. Ever since they brought me into that family, they didn't really make a big deal about it, and it was just a normal thing, so it was comfortable. My whole family, my extended family too, and my grandma and cousins and stuff, they never treated me any differently than anyone else. We had normal get-togethers on Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff, and it was just, they never treated me differently. It was just always I was a part of the family, and I always had been, so it was really nice.
The history of interracial adoption has been a long and arduous one, just as many of the other racial issues in this country have been. It all started in 1944 when the Boys and Girls Aid Society took notice of the increasing number of minority children waiting to be adopted. They focused on children of Asian, African American, and Native American heritage. They devised a campaign called Operation Brown Baby, with the objective being to find adoptive homes even if it was of a different race. Then, during the Civil Rights Movement, interracial adoptions increased dramatically in the United States, and the numbers more than tripled in 1966 and even more than that in 1971. It was at that point that the National Association of Black Social Workers denounced interracial adoption, saying that black adopted children were at risk of developing a poor racial identity due to the lack of a role model of the same race. However, some people don't view this as a lack of identity, but rather just as a different lifestyle.
Yeah, I think things would definitely be different if I grew up in a black family. I wouldn't say missed out on anything, because I don't feel like I missed anything, but throughout my whole life, I went to like all white schools and all white churches and stuff, so I didn't really know anything different, like culture-wise. But then when I got to high school, I made a couple African-American friends, and I remember my friend Marcus invited me over for dinner once, and we had like chitlins and collard greens and stuff, and he was so amazed that I've never even like heard of those things. So I guess in that way, I just missed, like I just didn't know what that was, and that was just like a big shock, because he's like, you're black, you're supposed to know what that means or whatever, or what that is. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So I guess that culturally, but nothing else really stands out.
Beginning in the 1970s, efforts to improve adoption became associated with opening records and encouraging family preservation. This began through suggestions that the inherent secrecy involving modern adoptions may affect the processing of forming an identity. It is also said to help the adoptee feel a sense of peace or closure.
I met them a couple years ago. I found my biological sister on Facebook, actually, because I knew her name. I knew her and my brother's names, and I found her, and then I added her, and she knew who I was right away. So we agreed to meet up, and then I went over there to her house in Kalamazoo, which is about an hour or so away. And she was like, oh, by the way, our mom's coming over, and I was like really nervous. So that's when I met my mommy and my sister, and it was like a really emotional thing, but it was like, I'm really glad I met them, because we still communicate now, and we still like do things together. Like I just went to my other brother's college or high school graduation, so we keep in touch, which is really nice.
It seems interracial adoptees also have their own obstacles to overcome, even after being placed in a home. Many interracial adoptees experience what is called appearance discomfort, or feelings of negativity due to societal discrimination. Oftentimes, interracial adoptees who are unmistakably one race will be discriminated against or treated differently because of their background or because they do not present the typical, or rather stereotypical, traits of that race.
I just get a lot, like all my friends say, like, oh, you're the whitest black person I've ever met, so I guess they expect me to be more black, like culturally, or talk more ghetto, I guess you could say, but I don't. And also a big thing is they get really shocked, the stereotype that all black people like watermelon, and that's not really, well, I don't like watermelon that much, so they expect me to like that, so it's a thing.
With all the different opinions, and what seems to be a lot of skepticism or controversy surrounding interracial adoption, one would think it's hard to have a positive outlook on life and be optimistic about the future. However, it seems as though some have chosen to embrace the life they have and push the negative feelings of others to the side.
I feel good about it. I mean, a lot of people are very negative towards it or have a lot of negative opinions, but I'm happy with my life, and I'm really glad that the family that chose me did, because I wouldn't have it any other way.
Whether one agrees or disagrees with interracial adoption, has positive or negative feelings about the topic, one thing remains certain. This is something that won't be fading away anytime soon. Issues in this area will continue to rise to the forefront of society and will continually be debated. Black children and white parents have always defined the debate about interracial adoption, and while the concerns of those against interracial adoption may be legitimate, it seems not all interracial adoptees feel like they have missed out.
I don't have any negative thoughts when I think of it, because when I look back at my life, like, I'm really thankful, and I'm really glad that I went to the family that I went to, because I love them more than anything. So they raised me really well, and they raised my brothers really well and taught me many things. So I'm really glad that I was adopted.
This feature was written and produced by Lauren Nichols. Special thanks to VanCore for her interview.